How would you explain what is the distinction between Silicon Valley and the tech startup scene here in the U.S. and Silicon Roundabout, as you call it, and the tech scene in England?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty fair to say that it's a little bit earlier in London. I don't think what happened in Silicon Valley was happening at that time in London. Similarly, I think what's happened in New York over the last 5 to 10 years, super impressive, fantastic growth, great momentum, and we're now seeing that in London just about 3 or 4 years behind, but it's burgeoning at the same rate, and it's absolutely explosive right now.
You've said in the past that you found Silicon Valley very insular, and that's something that makes immediate sense to me. How do you find the culture in London around the startups?
And that's the thing that I love about London. So I've been there for 10 years, as Olivia kindly mentioned. I moved there to join Skype, and it is such a cosmopolitan city, not dissimilar to New York, but far more diverse than Silicon Valley, and it pulls talent, diversity of thought, culture from all over the continent and really all over the world. And actually, I think that's one of the assets of London, and that's the reason why we see so many U.S. companies, U.S. founders, and investors now looking to London.
Is London really the tech capital of Europe, or is it Stockholm or Berlin or?
Oh, no. It's absolutely London. It's absolutely London. I mean, by far and away, objectively, there's more financial capital, there's more heritage there in London, there's more talent, the language being English, the time zone, and the sort of overlap between the two different parts of the world, it makes it London 100%.
I learned years ago that people in different cultures hear differently, and I've read that people code differently in the United Kingdom. What's the difference working with the techies out of Imperial College or Cambridge versus working with the techies out of Illinois, Urbana, or Stanford or Caltech?
Yeah, so I went to Urbana-Champaign. I have a CS degree from there. I do think it's a little bit different.
I agree.
But I actually think that's why there are some sectors where London is going to be leaps and bounds
What
ahead.
do they do differently? How do they think differently than we do?
I think it is slightly more rigorous. I would say it's probably less sort of on the cuff, sort of less creative coding and more sort of
Totally agree.
algorithmic.
And can I translate this?
Please.
They do difference equations.
They do.
People in the United
Differential
Kingdom
equations.
do first-order difference equations in 8th grade.
Yeah.
We're lucky if we get them in Urbana or RIT our senior year in college.
I totally agree. But I think that's why then you have info security, cybersecurity, fintech. I think those
that stuff, that granularity, rigorous stuff is their
Exactly. We're going to be far and away more ahead in London because of that and because of that.
Can we do higher order differential equations with Eileen next?
Well, you
can
pulled
do
up
whatever you want
next. Carpet of $0.
I want to ask, let's think of this as a pitch. You're here, you're talking to us about tech startups in London. Troy Gajewski of Skybridge is with us. You booking a flight to London right now?
Well, we don't do VC, as you know, right? We focus more on liquid markets. But it would be great to hear the pitch if you want to go for it.
Yeah, no, you need to start looking at London. You need to start looking. There have been massive exits over the last year, and that's what I'm talking about. It's now burgeoning, right? And I would argue that for the last few years, you're absolutely right. No reason to pay attention. But then last year, we've had, the listing of Just Eat. We had ASOS a couple of years before that. We've had Zoopla list. And I think now what you're seeing is you're seeing the whole life cycle in London, which is then feeding back into the ecosystem that I invest in.
Let me ask you this question. So historically, people have fretted in Europe that they're never going to create a big internet champion like we have in the U.S. Do you think there's any probability over time that Europe can compete with the U.S. in terms of the mega cap companies?
Absolutely. I mean, people do say that. I hear that all the time. But actually, even more personally, Skype is the only company that I've known of in internet or any other sector which has sold and exited for more than $2.5 billion more than once, right? So that was London-based. That is a European success story. We have done it. And, more than once, one company. We can do it again. I mentioned Just Eat. I mentioned, ASOS. I mentioned now you've got even private companies that are achieving these same valuations, whether it's Shazam, whether it's Spotify. It's absolutely happening. And I think it's at investors' peril if they ignore that market now.
Give us a sense of what you're working on. You have these very cool offices over by Silicon Roundabout. It's sort of an incubator, right? And you've got a lot of different startups that you're nurturing. Give us a taste of what you're working on. For example, the app Lulu, which rates your ex-boyfriend. I can attest to the fact that I've actually gotten an argument with somebody over an anonymous review that it was put on Lulu. That is one of Eileen's companies.
one of our strongest founders. She's a tour de force, and she has moved her business here to New York, by the way.
Really?
Which is part of the reason that the mayor of London is here, because there is such a natural bridge between New York and London. It makes perfect sense for companies that want to internationalize or be global concerns, whether they start in London and then want to come here to New York, or start in New York and then come eventually to London. But in addition to Lulu and some of the other teams, it's as I was mentioning earlier, you're really excited about fintech. We are not a fintech specialist fund, but 20% of our portfolio is in fintech, fin services. Really excited about cybersecurity, info security, and also health tech, med tech, which is another place that I think both New York and London have a leg up.
How long does it take you to decide whether or not you're interested in investing?
We can decide really quickly that we're not into it. It's faster to decide no, absolutely no, this isn't happening. The yes decisions will take a little bit longer.
Where does your talent pipeline come from? Is it coming down from Cambridge? Is it coming over from Berlin? Where are they trained?
It's all of the above, which is why I think London, again, has a leg up over Silicon Valley and maybe over New York. So
but really specifically, I mean, it can't be all of Europe. I mean, are there specific centers that provide the best coders?
It is all of Europe, honestly. It's former Soviet states, the Baltic states, so Tallinn, Estonia, which is where the Skype development team was. They have such a rigorous academic program in computer science and heritage. It is coming from Berlin, Stockholm, all over the continent, Southern Europe. Draws from the UK. You've got Cambridge, Oxford, you've got UCL, Imperial, leading universities. It's unbelievable. You've got people coming over from the U.S., whether it's people like myself or otherwise, who want to get out of an insular culture.
Back to the days of Paul Wilmot, I am flabbergasted at the cluelessness of Americans over tech and engineering in the United Kingdom.
You didn't even need me here.
It's just stunning. I mean, with Paul Wilmot literally inventing accessible quantitative finance at Imperial.
Yep.
And yet people over here think it ends, 14 miles east of Palo Alto.
Yep. What does the view from San Francisco miss? What do they not see?
You know what, actually, from my point of view as an investor in London, I'm glad that they're not paying attention, right? Because then it gives me an opportunity to fund those companies and maybe for you to kind of to keep an eye out. But they're starting to pay more and more attention. And actually, as the London mayor's here, there are going to be announcements later this morning about companies that are getting funding from these West Coast venture funds and East Coast funds as well. And so actually, they are starting to pay attention. So I'm losing my window of opportunity.
What's the fundraising environment like? Is it harder to raise money in Europe?
I think on a relative basis, there is less. The volume and the pool of capital is definitely smaller, but arguably so is the pipeline in terms of companies. So on a relative basis, it's probably, quote, harder. But the good companies, they're always getting funding, and they're drawing them now from more people who are competing with each other, whether they're coming from the States or they're still investors that are based in London and in Europe.
All right, fascinating stuff, Eileen. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Eileen Burbidge of Passion Capital.